So,
okay. Perfect. I can see a few people coming in. We'll just give it a couple more minutes to allow people to come in, and then we'll start the session. For the interest of those that are here, feel free to use the chat to write in who you are and where you're calling in from. The chat's also there for you to also answer any questions that you may have as well during the webinar. I think there's a read AI minutes notes coming in as well. So I'll just accept anyone that's got any AI note takers, then I'll accept those in as well if you want to add those in. Perfect. Welcome to the people that are joining. It's a real pleasure to have you all here. I'll keep admitting people as we go. Just a reminder that you can use the chat to introduce yourselves or ask any questions that you may have during the webinar. The webinar will be recorded, and if you've got any AI note takers that you want to admit in, please add them in and I'll accept them because I know how useful they are for us nowadays. Yeah. Brilliant. I can see more people joining. I'll just give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get started, and I'll introduce our amazing speaker who's joining me today. Okay, so as and when people do come in, I'll keep admitting people. But I think everyone can see my, hopefully everyone can see my slides for now. Just making sure everyone can see them. Perfect. Can everyone still see the slides? Nikki, can you see them?
I can see them perfectly. Thank you.
Amazing. Perfect. Right. So, firstly, a huge welcome to everyone today. Thank you for joining us. We're going to do a very short practical session on how you can evidence outcomes for people living with dementia beyond activities. I'm Devika Wood. I'm the CEO of a company called Brain Plus, where we've developed a solution called Ayla, which we'll go into more detail about. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Nikki Ayliff. Nikki is a highly respected leader in adult social care. She's got over 35 years of experience across the sector. She began her career as a care assistant, supporting people with learning disabilities, and has since progressed through every level of care leadership, including as an RM, an ops director, and a nominated individual. She's led domiciliary, residential, and nursing services across learning disability, mental health, and elderly care, and is deeply passionate about quality, compassionate leadership, and service excellence. She now has a consultancy, so Nikki Ayliff Care Consultancy. She supports care providers to strengthen their leadership, drive service improvement, and achieve outstanding regulator-ready services. I'll just get going and talk to you about where we're going to start within the process of thinking about the CQC evidencing and outcome collections. So we all know that expectations from the CQC are clear, but it's no longer enough to say what you intend to do or even what activities you offer. Providers are really expected now to demonstrate impact, outcomes, and strong governance. So today is not about kind of talking about what CQC is or what they're doing, but really about showing you how that can be done in a way that is evidence-based, practical for teams, and genuinely useful during inspections and audits. We're going to focus specifically on cognitive stimulation therapy, or CST, delivered using Ayla, and how a built-in reporting can support inspection readiness across multiple CQC key lines of inquiry. We'll keep the session very concise and we'll leave time for questions at the end. And as I said, please do use the chat function to introduce yourself, highlight your areas of interest, and then the session will be recorded and available as soon as the webinar ends. So I want to start by briefly naming the challenges many providers are facing. Most care homes are doing a hell of a lot. There are activity schedules, engagement sessions, reminiscence, music, crafts, all of which are super positive and really important. But what we are consistently hearing from providers is we're doing the right things, but we're struggling to evidence that impact. Especially around well-being, mood, cognitive function, which are all incredibly important things to be looking at when we think about delaying that acuity of that resident and ensuring that they're staying as healthy and happy for as long as possible. And from a CQC perspective, that gap really matters. So inspections and inspectors are not really asking, what do you offer? They're asking, what difference does it make? How do you know? And how do you oversee that? And generally, without clear outcome data, providers are often relying on anecdotal examples, staff goodwill, or narrative descriptions that are hard to evidence consistently. And that's where we're seeing that activities can actually fall short. They're really well intentioned, but they're often not structured, measurable, or auditable. And that's exactly where cognitive stimulation therapy fits in. It's one of the most widely researched non-pharmacological interventions for people living with mild to moderate dementia. And it's really, really impactful in the way that it's NICE recommended. So it's actually proven to improve cognition in dementia. The clinical evidence is that it delays decline by up to 6 months, and it measurably improves those mood, communication, and engagement metrics. And it's also globally adopted. But the most amazing thing about it, and why it becomes such a validated clinical grade dementia tool within the care settings, is that it's group based. So it requires 5 to 8 residents to sit and engage in this therapy. So it's really cost effective, it's simple to deliver, and it's scalable and sustainable. And we say now, because of the outcomes that we're collecting, that imagine if in 7 weeks you could see an improvement in cognition by 50%, boost quality of life in residents by 48%, and measurably improve the way they see their social life. Without further ado, and to getting to the good parts, I'm going to talk now with Nikki, who is one of the most incredible people that I've had the honour to meet on this journey. And we're really going to talk about how CST can actually help with a CQC inspection. So Nikki, over to you. You've done some amazing work with us to create a blueprint that then supports providers to really evidence those outcomes. So I'd really like to talk to you first and foremost about what you did, how you've come up with the key evidencing against those key lines of inquiry, and what you're seeing as an expert in this space, how it can really drive those improved outcomes and better inspection reports and outcomes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm like, that's a little embarrassed, but thank you very much. So yeah, I think just on the back of what you said, the outcomes that you're getting through CST, when people sign up and they do that project, they're getting such great results. And then the challenge is, how do you evidence that? How do you capture that information and say, actually, this is where that person started, and through all of our documentation and evidence, this is where we're kind of ending, and this is how we can showcase what we've done. So what we've seen is people doing some amazing work and you get the report that you produced, Devika, from Ayla. But actually, how does that filter into your evidence? So you might do things like your kind of like your evidence workbooks and things that you produce for CQC, but actually it's the level of detail. So what we're seeing is people aren't capturing that really critical information and how things really change for people. So when you look at, you know, all of the areas that you can utilize that information, so we've come up with an audit that will help you kind of look at and question, have we documented that? Does that look okay? Have we pulled that information through? So it's meant to be a really practical approach for people to be able to say, you know, this is where we're at, or actually if we just did that, it would really evidence this information. So for example, things around person-centered care. So through the CST journey and the evidence that comes out of how people's cognition improves, how does that translate into the impact that has on people every day? So what changes have you seen? How have you captured that? Have you documented it? So through this audit, it will drive you to think about the ways that you can do that through, you know, increased care note recording. It could be updates in your care plan, or you could see, you know, you might see a reduction in the use of an antipsychotic medication for somebody over that 7-week period. Capturing that and evidence in it, just say, oh, well, actually, yes, that's reduced, that's okay. But actually what this will drive you to do is look at, well, actually, what's the impact of that? You know, what are we seeing as a result of that? How much better is that person's life as a result of going on this journey? And it's being able to drive that evidence. So this audit will really kind of steer you to really question, have we got all of the information into that audit that we, into our documentation that we want to? And it's not about making extra work, because we all know it's a really busy environment, but people are already recording, people are already updating care notes, but it's just about getting to think about, when this person started this CST journey, they were not able to have this conversation. Now they're actively engaging in a conversation with their peers about the weather. You know, how amazing is that? And when families come in and say, my goodness, you know, it's made such a difference for mum. I was in a service the other day who were 3 weeks into their cognitive stimulation project, and there was they were working with somebody who was a major in the army, and on week 3 the family member came in and said, I can't believe the change in dad already. And that's after 3 weeks. So I was talking to the service about, oh my goodness, make sure you capture that. It's so rich and so, you know, it's so brilliant that they can see that change. You need to make sure you capture it. And they were like, well, how do I do that then? How do I qualify what that looks like? So this audit will really help give you some points to think about, how do we pull that information? How do we evidence it? And actually, no piece of written documentation is ever going to make up for what you see and how you feel and how that person feels, how the family feels. There's that is something you will see. And, you know, even I didn't know the gentleman, but even I felt really kind of, oh, that's amazing, when they were talking about it. So no documentation itself is going to capture that, but it's about being able to evidence what you can capture and how, you know, how you can show the progress. So there are some key things. So the audit will drive you to think about those things and really kind of question how your care plans are written as well. What does that look?
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's that care plan thing that you just said. I was just going to jump in there because we were at that amazing event the other night talking on the round table, and somebody, Beth Britton, was talking about some of the amazing things that you can do, which are actually free, so outside of the CST and, you know, the Ayla platforms, but bringing in things like captioned pictures, personalized meaningful playlists, folders of lyrics. And it got me thinking, is that when you're in the CST activities and you're doing those activities and you're finding out so much about these individuals because you're using these prompts and these photos and these reminiscence tools that are bringing in all of these conversations that you wouldn't normally have with these residents, but then that just augments all the other things that come around that individual. So one of our homes is now putting a little little whiteboard on the front doors, and after the activities, if there's a new piece of information that comes out about that resident in that activity, they're writing it on that little whiteboard that is on the front of their door. And then anytime somebody goes in, a care worker or the cleaner, they're prompted to use that new piece of information about that resident to have a conversation with them outside of those activities. And that really, for me, starts to lend itself to that real caring key line of inquiry, where it's like that you're evidencing a real person-centered approach to engagement, not just in the times you're delivering activities, but like around it, right? Which is so important.
And I think as well, life history work is so important. And I know that's something that is talked about, and you may all be doing really great pieces of work around people's life history. But what we tend to see is people who do a piece of work around somebody's life history, it's in the care plan, thanks very much, we've got it, it ticks the box, but actually it's how do you bring that to life? So again, part of the audit is about, how can we bring it to life? What does that mean for that person? How can we use it in everyday tasks, and how do we ensure that all of our team members know about this person? Other examples of working with somebody, and they were doing a life story piece with somebody, a live life story piece, and they were talking about their love of Elvis, and this gentleman didn't communicate verbally, was quite disengaged with everything, so they did an Elvis piece of work with around Elvis and played Elvis music, and he was up, he was singing, to the astonishment of the team. And this gentleman had lived in that service for a few years, and there was for me, I was like, all that wasted time, and he appeared to be so happy. So they've really started to use that now and take that information and go, okay, he really enjoys Elvis, how can we develop that, and how do we bring it to life so it's not just oh, we know he likes Elvis, every now and then we'll play a bit of Elvis. So it's really kind of drawing on that information and really making you drill down and go, what does it actually mean? Who is this person? And how do we use all this lovely rich history we've got of this person and all of their likes and their dislikes and who they are now, and bring that into the work we do every day. We've talked, haven't we, about the CST approach, and in my world, I just think, wouldn't it be a wonderful place if everybody had CST training, so everybody knew how to communicate in that style? So when you've got housekeepers going into people's bedrooms for deep cleans and chatting with residents, they're doing it in that style, and everybody's got the information about the people that they support, and their life story, and that kind of rich conversation that you can have from that. And when they find something new, they can share with the team. Wouldn't that be a great place, and wouldn't that be a great service? And I'm sure there are lots of services like that, but we're seeing people really struggle with pulling out the evidence and sharing it. So there's some amazing things going on, but it's just pulling it out and being able to showcase it and share it with the wider team, and not just keep it really kind of, we've got these results, they're amazing, but it's our activities team that does that. That's how it ends, and the rest of the time we don't worry about that because we're all very busy. So it's just trying to work through and be able to share that communication and that method of working, really.
Exactly. And I think the one thing that we've started seeing is that, and where I'm so passionate about, and I think it really does help us to drive, better approaches to how we deliver care, is that when you're tracking and looking at somebody's mood as a point in data, so you're evidencing that, at this week or post these 7 weeks, their mood is improved by X, or week by week you were seeing their mood improve or even decrease. It enables you to just capture something in a way that's really meaningful, shows you're being responsive to that. So why has that person's mood decreased? And, was it the type of activity that was being done during that CST session? Because we also know that, the CST activities are so broad and so widely kind of approach, in the sense of 1 week you'll be doing something about figures or childhood memories, and you're really starting to understand who that person is. And there's also sensitivity warnings that we give to some activities, because we know that there are certain activities that might be triggering to individuals, which again sometimes we don't take the time to know about, because we're not delivering maybe a vast array of activities that are really bringing out memory or enabling them to talk about things that are relevant. And so I think it's just that evidencing piece is so important, because without the evidence, without actually looking at what's the start point and what's the next point and how is it progressively improving, it's so difficult to measure whether your work is being impactful. We know work is impactful, but we need to measure it, because then we can truly know it. And I suppose that goes on to my next question, which is the outcome data and how we're collecting outcome data, obviously using Ayla and the importance of it. How does that change those inspection conversations, but also commissioner conversations? What do you think, as somebody that works in the sector, how is it important about showcasing it to these inspectors and commissioners, and how does it help?
So I think as well, under the kind of like well-led and good governance, pulling on that data and having that audit, having something that qualifies, actually, this is where we started, this is where we are, this is the further work that we've got to do, and actually these are results we're getting. So you're kind of the Ayla data coming out, as well as having a practical audit that you can evidence against regulatory requirements. Then in terms of commissioners, you can go to commissioners and say, actually, this is the work that we're doing. When you're marketing your services to private fee payers, you're saying, actually, this is how we operate as a home. And actually, if you've got a loved one that's got kind of mild to moderate, living with mild to moderate dementia, actually, this is how we can actually really support with that, and we can actually get some really good results. So it's being able to evidence that. And from a good governance perspective, you're then showing how you're reviewing it, how you're checking that it's working, what measures you're putting in place, because it will also throw up some other bits, around your kind of that governance side of things that you might go, oh, actually, we've just identified that, but actually we need to improve upon that, or we're doing that really well. Because auditing is about showcasing what you're doing really well, as well as what you might want to improve. But you're using all of that kind of good governance information as part of showing commissioners, using it as marketing to be able to say we're getting some real results, and actually the impact of what we've done has actually improved the standard of care that we give across the board. So you might do an audit based on your CST, but actually you should see then improvements across other areas in your standard audits that you do as part of your good governance, because actually the impact of that, so you might see a better impact across your meal service audit, or you might see a better impact around your medication audit, because you're going to, you might be evidencing a reduction in antipsychotic medication, so that will come through on your medication audit. So it's linking all of that together as well, to say, actually, as a result of one of these, our audit of our CST work has actually impacted on a wider scale. And you'll see the evidence across all these different areas, but here's our kind of like combined initial information on how we are really evidencing good care, because that's basically what it comes down to. We're all doing it for the same reason, because we want to provide absolutely the best service for the people that live with us.
Yeah, exactly. So then just touching a bit more onto the audit itself, can you talk through a little bit more about obviously what it looks like, how how we've designed it, or you've designed it, and what it would typically mean for a provider if they start using, Ayla and delivering CST, what it would mean for them to use the audit to support their overall governance?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not a complicated document. And what I will say about it is, it's still in its infancy. So as we gather the data in, the audit is for updating and changing as well. So, if you decided to go down that route and use the audit as part of your CST, we are very much open to feedback as well about actually we're finding that this would be really helpful in the audit, because ultimately we want to create the best document without overcomplicating things, because we're fully aware that you have more than enough audits to do on your day-to-day work. So not trying to give you any extra work. but you'll cover things like, you know, regulation 9 in person-centered care. So things like how does working with CST meet that outcome? So that will be things like how you evidence information in your care plans and your life history work, and it will drive you to review, which you'll do through your care planning audit, but actually this will be specific about the CST work. So you'll be putting out that information from your care plan around activity and well-being, emotional emotional care plan, mental health, your medication care plan. So there'll be a number of care plans within that person-centered care that would hopefully be reflective of that CST work that's been done. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Regulation 10 around dignity and respect, about how people are engaging with people and what the impact is that when you've unlocked something within the residents and they're having these different conversations and making friends, and you know, what does that look like and how do you evidence that, and how are people respectful about these new conversations that people are having, and how are people engaging? So you're covering information around regulation 10, your impacts on regulation 12 around safe care and treatment. So things like you being able to evidence how staff are trained, and that people are not just having training full stop, that's it, park it. It's that ongoing process and how you're developing your staff through the CST training, how you're having those supervisions with the people that are trained in CST to keep that motivation, and using that feedback that they give you for all the things they've learned. How do you take that information? How do you pop it into care plans, risk assessments, other places, life history? You might store life history information separately from your care planning system. You might have stuff in a folder, you might have stuff on a wall, but it's making sure all this feedback gets kind of updated into all of the right areas. So around kind of like regulation 12, you know, looking at risk, looking at, because you're unlocking something in somebody, but somebody might want to do something differently than they've already done. So you know, you're looking at how do we remain safe, how do we assess that situation, how do we help those people continue to grow while they're on that CST journey. So in terms of regulatory evidence, you're able to pull all of that as part of your CST project under one audit and be able to evidence that. But as I said, what it will do is drive you in your other audits to, there'll be outcomes for your other audits as well, and no doubt actions, because every audit has some actions. So it may drive in the first instance, you know, a bit more work in order for you to get where you need to be. But you know, you want to pull the information as much as possible. Regulation 17 for good governance, you know, you're adding another, you're evidencing how you're working with a project, you're having positive outcomes, and you're evidencing how you audit and how you manage that, how you update your records as a result of that. Any kind of like reflective practice will go into that audit as well. And obviously regulation 18 around your staffing and training, because you've invested in some training for your team, and it's also talking to them and being able to evidence what's the impact for them, because it's absolutely about the impact for the residents, but actually the feedback coming out from the teams that have been trained is really positive, and they find themselves really re-energized, really engaged, and really excited for the next session or where it's going to take, and they are really reaping the benefits of seeing residents come to life and making those changes. So I think it's, you know, we talk a lot about kind of the residents and the impact on the residents, but I think, you know, we should never underestimate the impact that investment in training for the team and the impact that that's had on the people that are currently trained. The people I've met so far in my work that have had CST training are so positive about what they're delivering. They're so proud to have been on a journey with a resident that they've seen come to life. And for me, I think that is amazing. So it's really important, I think, also to capture that. And again, it's how do you get that information? How do you showcase that? So supervisions and reflective practice and team meeting minutes and things that really kind of talk about CST and the benefits that people are seeing. But I think, you know, that it's really important. The staffing element of that is really important. and maybe we spend a lot of, we do spend a lot of time talking about resident impact, but it isn't to forget the impact for the team.
No, absolutely. And I think that's where one of the most common theme that we've had from everyone that's been doing this is that the staff that are trained in delivering CQC, you hit the nail on the head, they feel so empowered because they're seeing their residents tangibly improve. And because the data that we collect, the outcome data, is not just on the residents, it's on the facilitator feedback about how the facilitator has seen residents improve and how they felt delivering the sessions. We also get residents' family members' feedback, which is unbelievably powerful for every aspect of delivering a great home, because everyone always says the families need to be engaged. They're your biggest advocates. But also from a CQC perspective, you're bringing in family members and understanding how they're feeling and that you're engaging with them on the care of their loved ones. It's so critical. And so on a twofold basis, we've seen staff members feel like they're literally making a huge difference, and they've got this structured approach to doing something that's really changing someone's life. They're upskilled to collect the outcome data, which is so simple to do through a survey methodology, which takes them, a couple of minutes, but delivers the most unbelievable outcome report that they then look at and think, wow, I'm upskilled in a way that I can understand and collect cognitive outcome measures. I can look at mood, I can look at quality of life. And the biggest thing that we've seen is that when they come into the training, they all think like, oh my God, how am I going to be, I'm being trained in a non-pharmacological therapy that's lived in the NHS, like it's above me. And it 100% is not. We are so bad as a sector at upskilling and honouring the workforce that we have, who are exceptional human beings, but I don't think we give them enough credit or even enough empowerment to go above and beyond in terms of training and skill set development. So this is something that we've seen massively, and that staff confidence just ripples across the homes, doesn't it? And that's what's so, I think, important, which is why we gave the qualification training. We call the individuals that get trained dementia therapists, because it's a really amazing way to make people feel like they are doing something so valuable that is a skill set and qualification in itself. And it's soon to be CPD accredited, which is really, really nice as well. So one of my other questions, and then I will stop and maybe hand over to any questions in the audience, or for you, Nikki, to give just moved over there, give any sort of final thoughts on it, is on the piece about kind of using the data. And I know we spoke about this the other day at that roundtable. You're collecting this data, you're showing that, you've improved someone by 40% in their memory, or you're seeing that somebody has not engaged as much in a session, and you've collected that piece of data or that outcome metric. As like a provider, what should you be doing with this data and this outcome data? How can you use it to, I suppose, drive improvements across the sector and service, not just from a perspective of auditing and governance, but just, I suppose, in general?
I think it's it's quite a difficult question to ask, because we had a long conversation about sharing of wider data to improve. And whilst people are focused on sharing data or collecting data for their own service, it's how does that, in the wider context, evidence improved outcomes and help other people look at that information. I don't have the answer to that particularly. Other people might have a viewpoint on that, but I just think where we were talking about collecting of data, and I suppose one of my thoughts around collection of data and inputting onto systems and gathering all of that information is, we've got the person in the centre, and it's absolutely focused around their journey, their outcome, and what you can see. You have to evidence it because that's part of our regulations. That's what CQC want to see. It's what your local authority want to see. But I think where it leads me back to be able to do all of that really well, there's a training element, isn't there? And I see quite often people have implemented digital systems, but they're not using the systems to the maximum capacity because they've not had the full range of training. So I think I would say, really, as a side thought, it's great that you can do all of this stuff and take an audit and use CST and drive those outcomes, but you won't be able to drive that information if your team don't have your training on your digital system. So I think training on that digital system for people to really understand. So you see, don't you, on lots of digital systems, they're little tiles and boxes and people just click, and it's very task focused. In order to gather the right data and to be able to really evidence good outcomes, you have to go past that tile clicking. It has to be written, because it's about people's emotion. It's about people's emotion. It's about what people are seeing. There isn't a box and a tile that really sums that up. So for me, you can have all this great paperwork and you do all this great training, but ultimately, if people can't use the system to input the information, then you're never going to collect it. So as a side thought, it's just, if you do have those digital systems, is thinking about, has everybody had enough training? You hear people say all the time, well, I don't know how to use that. I've got this device, I click this, I click that. That's all I do on it. But actually, everybody's got to take some accountability, haven't they? Because the people you're asking to input the information, that's your critical information. They need to know why, and they need to know how to use a system that's just past clicking a was happy, was content. That's not enough data for you to collect, because it's not actually, what does that mean? You know, what does that mean for that person along the journey? So that's my kind of thoughts around. I don't know if that answers the question really, but
no, it's just one of those questions that I think is really important. Well, it's important to hear. Like, I think everyone's trying to solve the same problem, aren't they? We're all trying to understand. There's a lot of data being captured across care providers currently. Some people use the likes of Sensio, Pain Check. We're all looking at different points in a person's life or medical conditions and trying to capture as much data as possible through, you know, mitigating falls or mitigating, you know, issues that we could look out for, proactive issues that potentially could cause disastrous consequences if we're not thinking about things appropriately. And I just think it's really fascinating that, you know, we do look at a person from fall preventions, from making sure they're sleeping well and, you know, their diet's good. And I think what's been really fascinating about this journey is that we do so many great things to invigorate a person's well-being, which will hopefully, and it is clinically proven, to prevent things like falls, prevent things like over administration or over prescribing of medications. But we've never historically in the care settings captured well-being, cognition and mood as a data point. So I think what's really fascinating now as we start to, you know, work with loads of care providers is that for once we're capturing those metrics which will actually inform and support preventing falls, preventing frailty, reducing that overprescription. So what we will start to see as we start to look at these data points as a whole joined up is that we're delivering a truly person-centered care, but it's effective, it's evidenced, and it's going to hopefully show material changes in that person's health trajectory further down the line, as long as we start now looking at what really is meaningful, which is their brain and their ability to kind of cognize and be happy. So yeah, I'm always fascinated to hear what people think about how we join it up, but I think it's an unanswered question at the moment. People don't have the answer to it, do they? How we're going to join all this up at one point.
We don't have the answers.
No, someone in here might though.
Yeah, they might well do. Please share if you do, because I'd be interested to know people's thoughts actually.
Yeah. So it's 12:37, which is usually I'm right on time, which is unheard of for me. There is 3 minutes to spare, and I don't know if anyone has any questions that they wanted to ask. I have seen some people who have put who they are, which is amazing. Thank you for saying where you're calling from and coming in from. If you have any questions for Nikki or myself, please feel free to drop it in the box. If you don't have any questions, that's absolutely fine. If you would like any follow-on information from myself or Nikki, then please do reach out. I'll put my email address here and actually Nikki's email. Nikki, if you write your email address too, so people can contact you, because you do amazing work across care providers, supporting them through your new consultancy. So can totally advocate for that.
Thank you. That's very kind.
And yeah, I'm not biased either.
Pay you later.
Yeah. And yeah, and obviously if anyone wants to know any further information about Ayla and CST and how we embed it, then we're more than happy to answer any questions. We can show you some outcome reports that have been generated from a number of care homes now. But yeah, truly I think the biggest theme that we've seen, and this is just coming out from all the providers that we've been speaking to, is that when people are leaving those rooms and they're, those 5 to 8 individuals are leaving those, rooms, and when they finish doing CST, every provider that we work with has said that the relationships have continued into the common room between those individuals. And I think that is just kudos and shows that, through creating these meaningful connections and creating these brilliant conversations, you're sparking relationships within your residents, which I think we all need a friend, don't we? And we all need somebody that we want to talk to. So I think that's brilliant. And Anne said that you use CST and it's a great approach for also forming social bonds. Yeah. Amazing. Well, if there's no questions, I wanted to thank Nikki for being part of this conversation with me. Thank you so much for your time and your amazing brain power and, bringing your fantastic experience into what we're doing. Thank you everyone to the people that have participated, and yes, please do follow up with us if you want to speak. We're more than happy to just have conversations with anyone here, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend when it arrives. So thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.